Can you tell us who you are and when and where you were born?
My name's David Barrie, and I was born just outside the city of Galt on a farm in 1933. So this is 2013, and that makes me, I have celebrated my 80th birthday. Very happy to move on.
And the county that you remember of was?
Waterloo County Junior Farmers was what I started out in because we just had a county club and until 1947, but I'm the youngest of 7 and all of the others were involved, so it just seemed natural that I would become a junior farmer, and all of them were either county directors or county presidents, so they were very active. And it was very nice in 1947 when we did set up our local club in North Dumfries Township. And it's a little different from the rest of the townships in the county. We have 5 townships, and they're Waterloo, Wilmot, Wellesley, and Woolwich, and then the Scotch live down in North Dumfries Township. And Mr. E.I. McLaughlin, our ag rep, used to make jokes about that.
And what sort of things did your club do down in North Dumfries?
Well, I guess I have to be honest and say the first thing that the main reason we set it up was so we could have dances. Those other townships, a lot of Mennonites, and we really respected them, and we didn't want to stir things up by trying to have a faction that would have dances, so we set up the North Dumfries Club. Very active club, and for many years, and dances were just one of the things, but I think it was out of respect for the rest of the county that we set up our own club.
What sort of community events and community involvement did North Dumfries do?
Oh my goodness, we did all kinds of community events at fairs and raising money for activities. I guess we were part of a campaign to have mailbox signs. You know, it was nice to drive around the community and see farms and so on, but whose farm is that? So we had this campaign, and that was a pretty good one. We sold hundreds and hundreds of mailbox signs. Then you knew that this was a Martin and this was a Smith, and it was great.
Now going back to the previous question, what was involved in setting up a new club?
Well, we had some people who were very active in the county club, and that was a big help. My brother was the honorary president, and another fellow who was active, Bob Ford, and they had good experience from the county club. They'd gone through the offices, and so they knew what to do, and we set up with all kinds of committees and lots of people to work with, because we were probably the most active township out of the 5 in Waterloo County.
And within the county, what sort of projects or events took place?
I think one of our big events was our drama festival, and we were one of the early counties that held a regular drama festival in the Kitchener Collegiate every year, and every township. We had 5 plays, and year after year we had that place filled with people who came to see our plays, and there weren't many people that didn't take part in a play, so it's a good experience to get a little action and acting.
So there was just the 2 clubs in the county?
Really just the 2 clubs, the County Club and the North Dumfries Club.
And how many members were there in the county at your time?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I think in our North Dumfries Club, I can't really say for the county, but in the North Dumfries Club we had between 60 and 70, and that varied.
And how much did it cost to be a member?
I don't think we even charged anybody anything in the North Dumfries Club, and I can't remember whether it was $5, $2, or $10 in the county.
And after a while, you became a little more active in the club and in the county, and they made you provincial director. Can you tell how that happened?
Well, it's a kind of an interesting story because it was a bit of a mistake. My brother George was supposed to go to conference at Guelph, the annual meeting, and introduce Dr. H.L. Patterson from Ottawa, a high-level speaker, but he couldn't go because he was busy on the farm, and he said, when you go there, you tell Dick Hilliard that he can't be there and find somebody else. So when I passed the message on, Dick Hilliard said, okay, you're introducing Dr. H.L. Patterson. When I came back to my senses, I realized that I asked for it, and I guess it wasn't the first challenge I accepted, but I did it, and I became quite active. And then I believe it was the next year, as county director, I went on to become more active.
Okay. And what sort of discussions and things happened at the provincial board level that you were a part of?
We had most interesting discussions about what kinds of things were best for young people across the province. What kind of programs should we be having? And you know, we used to have separate programs for the junior institute, separate programs for the boys, and then we got together afterwards, of course. But those were the main things we talked about was, okay, what kind of an ag program? We didn't have to talk a lot about the social activities because that came naturally, and people were quite happy to even just get together and have a box lunch sale and buy your favorite girl's lunch at a program. Yeah.
So after a while, you got thought of really highly and you moved up the ranks in the board.
Well, I was quite surprised when I was asked if I would stand as county director and stand for the office of vice president, and I didn't really think a lot about it. It just seemed natural that I had all this experience going back to 47, and here almost 10 years later I was nominated for vice president, and I had a great deal of respect for the people ahead of me, like Russ McAllister and Myrtle Stewart, and so I enjoyed the opportunity to spend time with all these county directors from all across the province, and super experience hearing young people from farms all over. And at that time, most of them were from farms.
And what kind of election was it for vice president?
You know, I don't remember except that I won.
Do you remember who else was on the ballot?
No, I don't.
And then you automatically moved on to president?
Yes, I guess when you were vice president, I don't recall otherwise anybody not moving on. And that was an exciting time, and I think my biggest challenge was getting to know the directors that I was working with, and getting to know them and their strengths and who could do a good job with certain things, because we ran a lot of good programs then. We had the Toronto Conference, which was a big do that we all looked forward to every January, and a lot of people attended that. We had the public speaking, we had the musical competitions, and it took a lot of people to make that program run well, and it was a good program year after year. So I always said we had people just coming out of our ears with talents to run those kinds of programs.
What were the duties of the vice president and the president? What duties were expected and done?
Well, I can't remember if there was a set number of meetings, but we regularly held meetings to talk about all these programs that we ran, and I think the nice thing was that we had good people, and at some point I'm going to talk about three mainly people that helped us along the way. And they, for instance, the Secretary Treasurer was a paid employee of the Extension Branch. And I have to start out by talking about Dick Hilliard. And as president, I had to come up with an agenda for the meeting. Well, if it hadn't been for Dick Hilliard, it probably wouldn't have been a good agenda just on my own. But those people had talents. He's the first one. I'll leave the others till their names come up sometime.
Well, let's keep talking about Dick.
Okay.
What kind of person was Dick? What was his contribution to junior farmers?
Well, number one, he was a steadying force, and he commanded a lot of respect all across the province. I met him at leadership schools. I met him at judging competitions, and he was the person who could give the direction for what was going to go on at those things. He was a big, tall guy. When he spoke, everybody listened. When he gave out the rules, you paid attention as best you could. Just an outstanding person with a great sense of humor, who directed, in particular, Junior Farmer Leadership Camp for many years, and that was a week to remember for so many people across this province. Outstanding highlight of junior farmer career was for me.
Okay. And then going on to some others, was he the only Secretary Treasurer that you had dealt with in your time on the board?
Well, he was up until I became president, and then I was at the Royal Winter Fair, and somebody whispered to me, Dick Hilliard is moving on, and you're going to have Art Bennett as your Secretary Treasurer. Now, for some people that might have been a jolt. For me, I was fortunate in that I knew Art Bennett very well, because Art had spent a summer as our assistant ag rep. I knew him well, worked with him in junior farmers and in 4-H, and so he was well respected too, and a stickler for making sure that leadership was top of the list for these young people that gradually move up and become part of the senior organizations like the Federation of Agriculture, Farmers Union, councils of towns, and reeves and mayors of townships, and you see that to this day. Those people have moved up and taken responsible positions all across the province in organizations.
What was the role of the Secretary Treasurer to junior farmers in relation to the provincial government?
In relation to provincial government, well, I was always glad that the government would pay his bills and let him help us run our programs, because I've talked about people before, and we had people, not just the Secretary Treasurer, but we had ag reps and assistant ag reps, even engineers, and these people were all involved in helping junior farmers organize their programs and make them run well.
And you already mentioned a few individuals before you in Russell McAllister and Myrtle McCutcheon. Could you say a few words about what kind of presidents they were ahead of you?
Well, okay, those two, Russell, I saw him in action, and Russell was a good talker on his feet. He had a lot of good experience from his job, and I didn't see as much of him as I did Myrtle McCutcheon now, because in 1956 I went overseas and spent 2 months with Myrtle Stewart, Eleanor Lillico, Mac McLaren, and we got to know each other very well, so it was easy for us. We got along well, and it was easy for us to work together. And Myrtle, as a teacher, commanded a lot of respect too, and she could run a good meeting. There were others before her. I could name lots of them, but we'll get into people, and it's non-stop people.
And right after you came Kay Summers.
Yes.
She had your shoes to fill, and how did she do?
Kay was excellent. I knew her well because we used to see each other occasionally, and I'm not sure I should record that on film because there's somebody else who was seeing her regularly too. But ain't Jim? Anyway, no, I can't complain about any president that I know. Everybody had their differences. I'm sure some of them wondered about me when I was president and the way I did things, but I loved those people that I worked with, and every chance I got to see them. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I did was I made a scrapbook with a map, a cutout of each county, and everybody that I knew in that county, I wrote their name in that county. Now, if I was going to speak in Brant County, well, I came from Waterloo, but I would write Oxford and Wentworth. I'd take a look and see who I knew, because I know they would be at that meeting in Brant County, because junior farmers crossed the county lines an awful lot.
What were some of the most significant or interesting things that happened to junior farmers during your year as president and past president?
Well, I guess the opportunities that I got, I've never forgotten. For instance, when I was president in 1957, I think this tells me about the respect that the Junior Farmers Association of Ontario had across Canada, because there was a call came from World Assembly of Youth, part of United Nations, for someone to represent rural youth in Canada at a conference in Beirut, Lebanon. I happened to be in the right place at the right time as president in 1957. So I got to go to the Middle East and attend a conference with people from 80 countries and talk about rural youth programs around the world. What an enlightening experience that was. So, you know, nice to be in the right place at the right time. And just the year before, I'd had the experience of spending 2 months in England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, seeing farming practices in those countries. I've never forgotten those things, and I still have contacts in Britain from that.
Okay, well, we'll cover both of those things. First question on the follow-up there with the Youth Assembly. What kind of came out of the assembly at the end of it? Was there a direction, or was it just a meeting?
I can't recall that there was direction, but I met in a small committee which made up a report of the kinds of programs that young people ran, and I particularly remember some of the young people from countries, particularly in Africa and Asia, who, to run a rural youth program, put their life on the line, because anything that was run that wasn't government was suspect. And so I was amazed, and I bumped with an Indian by the name of Krishna Swami, and I learned all about Indian culture from him. And I traveled home, and he came and stayed with me, a young fellow from British Guiana. And he spent a week with me, and we went to the plowing match and so on. And then I found out years afterwards, when he went home, he had a lot of difficulties. I didn't think he was a bit of a rebel, but I know he spent some time in jail, and his wife let me know how things were going with him. So, we wouldn't think about any difficulties running a program where these guys put their life on the line.
And we'll get to the exchange in a little bit. Next question I have is, what changes occurred in junior farmers during your involvement that are important to know of?
Well, I think one of the things that, as numbers went up and down, and we used to talk about that at our directors' meetings, and all right, how do you account, if numbers go down, what do you do? I think I remember encouraging people to look to people who were interested in the farm or from small communities but weren't necessarily farmers. So these people, they're young people just like we are. They're not a farmer, but they maybe are good friends, and so that's a way to bring new people into the organization. I always encouraged us to look even in town for people who had an interest in farm.
So there wasn't any changes in direction or policy for junior farmers?
I don't think so. Just a natural change as as farms became bigger, and it's not quite the same as it is now. It's tough times for them now.
Well, that leads to the next question, the challenges that junior farmers faced in your time. Was it mostly with the farm scape changing?
Yes, I think so. I I can remember talking about things that are have more effect now, but things like a 100-acre farm, you couldn't make a living on it, so the neighbors would buy farms and become bigger. That means there's fewer people out there who are available for these clubs. I didn't think it was as significant at the time, but when you think back to the changes in farming, it certainly has an effect.
What do you feel was your most significant contribution to junior farmers?
Well, I guess I accepted the challenge of leading singing, and I did an awful lot of that. For instance, at Junior Farmer Camp, yes, I went in '56, but I went for the next 8 years on staff doing music and just being a staff member. Didn't do music every year, but I think I challenged other people to become active. I challenged them to, for instance, at camp, my first challenge was, you get to know all of these 80 or 85 people at camp by the third day, and you're going to stand up and you're going to name everybody. They're going to cover their name tag, and I don't ever recall losing that challenge. I have had several people say to me, you challenged me to do something sometime. Well, I can name one who said, at a leadership school, I said to her, would you lead a sing-song? Just like that, spur of the moment. And she said, I just about died on the spot, but I did it. And you go on to do other things. I've challenged people to get up and, at a meeting and introduce a speaker or thank a speaker or make some little presentation. The point being that every time you do some little thing, it becomes easier, and then you can do the big things.
So you'd already mentioned a few times about your trip to the United Kingdom. How did you get selected for that trip?
We had to go through a selection process, and there would be, I think there were 3 people from Extension or OAC or whatever who were the committee, and they grilled you pretty well about why you were there and why you would want this trip and what you thought the trip might do for you. And that was a good process to go through. And the fact that I didn't get selected the first year, I thought, well, I'll come back. And I did. And it was the trip of a lifetime, because we lived on different farms, and we got that experience. And we made contacts, and I know people that have far more contacts than I ever kept. But it's wonderful. Just 2 weeks ago, I spent half an hour on the phone with the lady at one farm where I spent 10 days. Wonderful.
So that was in 4 different countries?
England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. Yeah.
And you got to meet with their version of junior farmers?
Yes, they called it young farmers. They laugh at us because they say you're junior, we're young. But they were well organized, and they had people who were county organizers. I guess the highlight of my trip was to meet a lady who celebrated her birthday the same day as mine, and that was Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother.
Fair enough. Was there anyone you met in junior farmers that became a significant part of your life?
Well, that's a good question. Certainly. I went to speak in South Simcoe at a meeting, and that's when I started taking out the gal who became my wife. Miriam has been with me for 54 years now, so yes. That was really an important part of junior farmers, the social activities, and there are so many people who have experienced the same thing. There was one other person. I mentioned way back that there were 3 people in particular that I wanted to talk about. There's one other person I'd like to zero in on, and that is Padre W.A. Young, or as we fondly called him, Baldy Young. And here was a man who was probably the best known agriculture speaker across the province of Ontario. He was Padre at the Ontario Agricultural College, well known, and he had a stutter. And I have never met anybody who put to his advantage a disability like his stutter. He had people eating out of his hand as he spoke. And the first time I ever met him, I was not even in junior farmers, but I heard him speak, and he spoke for almost an hour, and he told jokes most of that time. He was a Presbyterian minister, had great experience. He said, "All the sins I know, because I've had them all." But he became beloved by so many junior farmers because he became part of every activity. He was at all the camps that I was at. He was at leadership schools. He was at conferences. Just a highly respected person who at camp, for instance, he would lead a course on courtship, marriage, and home. He would be a counselor available to people. He helped me when I had to speak at a church service. He helped me when I said I was going to go in the public speaking competition at the Toronto Conference. Always available to help.
He worked for the OAC, or he worked
He was
for...
Padre at the Ontario Agricultural College, yeah.
And the OAC lent him out to junior farmers?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
What was one of the wildest experiences you had as a junior farmer member?
Well, I think field days were always lots of fun because there were so many things going on that ended up with a dance. I remember the year our ball team won the championship, and I don't know if that was the wildest thing, but maybe some of the bus trips that we had, some of our bus trips to another county or an exchange, just getting together with people and not too much activity planned, so you just had a lot of fun. Just getting together with them, I would say, was wild fun all the time. Lots of fun people around.
And you've already touched on leadership camp, so let's go further into leadership camp. You first were invited as a delegate to leadership camp, and then you were invited back afterwards?
Yeah, in 55 I went as a camper, and I enjoyed it so much. They elected me spirit of camp, and that was exciting. That led to a lot of speaking at church services and so on, and the music part of it really struck me as a highlight, and I got invited back. Well, 57 I kind of missed because I was in Beirut, Lebanon at the Rural Conference. But the next years I went, and there was a music component of camp, and I directed that, and we had a choir, and we had not just singing but choir work. And I did that for a few years, and then there were other years I was just on staff because they needed staffers to help with this and that.
How did leadership camp work?
Well, every county could send 2 delegates, and you were organized, and this lasted for quite a few years. You were organized into tribes. Now, people laugh about that now because in respect of the native population, we were Indian tribes. And so some people think, wow, that was not very smart. But this went on all the years that I was there. You know, we were Ojibwe and Algonquin and Mohawk and so on. And then I remember a few years later they changed to ships, different crews and so on. But it was organized so that you had a chieftain and a sagamore, and there were 5 tribes, so you had roughly 15 people in a tribe. And you were really challenged to do things around a campfire. Meals were exciting because somebody would get up and challenge somebody else to arm wrestling or to all kinds of silly things. And if you put your elbows on the table, they sang about you. I don't know if we had time to eat at every meal. And that was when I would throw out my challenge. Who's going to name all these 80 people here without looking at a name tag?
When and where did leadership camp occur?
This was at Geneva Park, Lake Couchiching in my time. Now it varied, it had been other places before then, but I started in 55 and it had been going for quite a few years by that time, and then there were changes after. But camp is an outstanding place for leadership development because people don't realize they're being developed in leadership skills, because they're on the spur of the moment asked to get up and do something, or the chieftain of a tribe would be called on to send somebody out to respond to a challenge, and as one of those 15 members, all of a sudden you're picked on and you've got to go spur of the moment. You have to do something, sing a song or whistle, and you get used to doing something in front of people, and it helps you become a leader.
What do you want to be remembered as a president? How do you want to be remembered?
I think I kind of like to be remembered as one who helped people. You know, I challenged them to lead a sing-song or make a speech or do something. But in challenging them, I would help them too if they needed help. And as president, I was surprised many times to have people say, "Could I speak to you? I've got a little problem going on in my club," and those opportunities to go one-on-one with somebody and help them with a problem, whether it was even a personal problem or something that they were asked to do. I don't know. That may or may not be my legacy.
How did Junior Farmers change you as a person?
Well, I think I was remembered as kind of a shy kid when I was growing up, and I think Junior Farmers really helped me come out of my shell and do things, and it became something that I enjoyed doing. I enjoyed the challenge of leading a sing-song for a big group. That was probably my forte, because I led, for 35 years, I led sing-songs, breakfast, lunch, and dinner at National 4-H Conference. I followed Padre Young, the fellow I was just speaking about, and encouraging people to get out and do things.
A couple of questions I skipped over, I noticed. You had talked about a conference in Toronto.
The Toronto Conference was a big thing. Toronto Conference, Guelph Field Day, annual meeting were sort of the three main big events that we had to plan and organize and participate in. And it seemed natural to push those because I really enjoyed. I went in the public speaking competition. I was in a mixed quartet competition. I was in the public speaking.
What was the Toronto Conference?
It was open to all the counties across Ontario, and it was competition. Those public speaking, all the musical. I even judged a music competition there one year. The public speaking was the focus, because the public speaker, the winner, would go on and speak at church services and so on. I lost out. I didn't win, but I thoroughly enjoyed being a part of the competition. Competition's good for you.
And field days. What were field days?
Well, field days were when you saw the best of the ball teams, both boys and girls, and tug of war, jumping, and then ending with a nice dance at night.
And what happened at the annual meeting?
The annual meeting usually focused on, there would be a speaker and there would be probably a panel discussion on, and I always enjoyed panel discussions because, for instance, somebody like Padre Young would be the chairman of the panel, or somebody like that who did a good job of running and keeping the questioning going. And so junior farmers selected from all across the province would participate in the panel, And it may be about what kind of programs should local clubs organize. Um, there might even be some competition, well, not at the annual meeting, no. But that was when you ran into the elections, and that's kind of exciting too. Finding out who was going to be the new vice president and moving up into the directorate.
How many members were in the province at your time?
I don't remember exactly, but in the 7,000 to 8,000 members, and you know, coming from all across the province, divide them up into the where there are about 55 counties. Some were far more active than others, and so I remember Art Bennett and I looking at some counties and saying, you know, can we help you? Can we help you organize a club? And we did that on several occasions. I believe we went to Russell County, where Mac Arbuthnot was, and helped them. And went to, they organized a club on the Guelph OAC campus as well.
You were involved with a function at one of the very first functions at Ontario Place. A music event.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that event?
Well, that was kind of exciting. I don't remember what year, but as a as a bell ringer, I played the bells in 10 bells in our church steeple, and you couldn't practice, so I took 10 little farm bells and I hung them on the clothesline, and I wrote music for those bells up in the steeple. And that got to be kind of fun, playing those little bells, so I expanded out to 17, and my gosh, that goes back to 1956, and I guess I have to thank junior farmers for this, because when I went to Britain, everywhere you went, every town had bells ringing. And I came home and our bells in the church were silent. And I said, that's no good. They're there. So that was 56. Yes, I was in the period where I would take on something as a challenge. And so I said, I'm going to learn how to play those. So a few years later, when I had this set of bells going, I played the bells at Ontario Place when junior farmers were invited to put on a program there. I'd really forgotten about that. I'm still playing them.
Is there other stories that I haven't asked the right questions to get out of you that perhaps you would like to share?
No, I think I've covered many things. I think I enjoyed the people as much as anything that I was involved with. Like, I can still remember when I was elected president and asked all the county directors to come on the platform in War Memorial Hall at Guelph, and I introduced them all, and I tried to think of something funny or otherwise about each one of them as I introduced them. Some I had barely met, but I made it a point to get to know, to meet and get to know each and every one of them.
What have you done with yourself since leaving Junior Farmers?
Well, lots of things. I've spent not a total of 13 years, but 2 years solid, and then the next 11 years, the winters in Africa doing agricultural development through the Presbyterian Church. And those were some of the best years of my life. we were in a car accident, hit by a drunk driver, and I don't know how we survived. But we said when we did survive that we were going to relook at life, and we said we're going to do several things. We're going to buy a cottage and enjoy life, and we're going to volunteer for service somewhere else in the world. And I guess when I think of that, it may relate back to Dick Hilliard. And I remember at a meeting we got a request to send money to a country in Africa. And Dick Hilliard said, we shouldn't send money, we need to send people. And I think that may have stuck in my craw, and that's why I said we're going to Africa.
If you could say something to a member today, a junior firm member today, what would you tell them?
Well, I'd say partly because my farewell speech as president was looking ahead with a rear view mirror. And I would say, look back on the things that were good, that did something for members and clubs and made it exciting to be a junior farmer. Maybe the same things don't work now, but something that will develop leadership in people, because we always need leaders. More and more so, we need clever leaders, and we've got lots of clever young people, but they just need developing. So look at the things that will help you and your club, and go for it. Make them work.
And I noticed I got an older version of my question sheet here. So some of the questions just realized I didn't have on here to ask you, which may seem out of order, and that's okay. What was the relationship like between junior farmers and the provincial government?
The only way I can answer that is that the provincial government must have had respect for this organization, because I know, well, they gave us a full-time employee, not full-time working with us, but a good employee like Dick Hilliard or Art Bennett or whoever, and gave them the time and the resources and a secretary to help us. I don't know. It seems to me they respected and there were also agricultural ministers like I'd named Bill Stewart a way back, who was a real farmer's friend, and that kind of person would put pressure on to make sure that junior farmers got what they needed. Junior farmers, 4-H, whatever, young people in the rural communities.
And the next question, what do you feel is the importance of having a program like Junior Farmers in the province of Ontario?
Well, more and more, agriculture is, I don't know, put down. They don't have much power in politics. Our rural communities don't have any clout. So I really am happy when I see where somebody who has come through an organization, or I see somebody who is speaking on behalf of agriculture, and I can tell that they know what they're talking about, and they've got good experience. They can respond to the kinds of things that agriculture faces. We've had people in the past in government who have encouraged that, and like I think of Eugene Whalen, for instance, who who could stand up to any government. And anybody that I see who can stand up to government like that and stand on their feet and talk and be respected by agriculture, let's develop more of those. And if we don't have an organization where they start young, it takes time to develop them.
Now, I'm going to ask this question again because you seem to have stories. Just I know they're there, but you're not touching them. Is there any stories that we haven't found out about that you'd like to share?
Well, we've had some pretty good reunions. And what I like about reunions, and as time goes on, we lose these people. I like to think back to one guy in particular who was very active in Junior Farmers because he was at the very first meeting when it was formed in '44, and that's George Atkins. And George Atkins used to come and do things like you're doing right now, and he would record people's responses to questions and ask about what was going on. And George Atkins, I always look forward to see him, and I remember him going to camp, and he would interview people there. He would interview people who had never talked into a microphone in their life. And you know, even if the microphone is hidden, it can be a little challenging to say what you want without getting nervous, but we need to go through those things. So, you know, and then I got to work with George Atkins because he set up a program, a radio program to help developing countries. I got to be a member of his program called Farm Radio International, and I was the first one on the board to actually go to Africa and see his program in action. And his program was well respected because it got $4 million from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to do their work. Those are the kinds of highlights that I like to remember about what Junior Farmers did for me. Because I knew George, George knew me, and we worked together well.
Okay. That's all the questions I got.
That's about all I got too.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.